Welcome to the Nature Commission's State of Nature 2024 talk series. This presentation is part of a series of talks and is one of the ways we are sharing the information contained in State of Nature 2024. This presentation is about our freshwater habitats and associated species, pressures on those habitats and species, and what we can all do to help reduce the pressures and protect our freshwater environments. Guernsey and Herm's freshwater habitat consists of streams, locally known as duits, ponds, inland wetlands, also known as swamps, and human-made bodies of water in disused quarries and reservoirs. Wetlands are a rare habitat supporting many specialist species. Specialist species are those which are specialised to thrive in specific environments, wetlands for instance. They rely on the resources provided by those specific environments, and so are unable to thrive in other environments or habitats. The opposite of a specialist is a generalist, which is a species that can thrive in a wide variety of habitats and conditions, and which can make use of a variety of resources. Essentially, this means that if we want to see those specialist species sticking around, it's important that we look after our wetland habitats. The dominant species associated with wetlands are reeds, which are important for insects and breeding birds. The Grand Prix and the Clare Mar are some of the oldest continuous patches of wetland found in Guernsey. Standing water, such as ponds, is another type of freshwater habitat and will support freshwater plants, insects, and birds. It's difficult to determine the biodiversity value of ponds, as it varies due to factors such as depth and pollution. Running water habitats are found as natural and human-made streams. Many streams run underground in human-made culverts, so have significantly reduced biodiversity value because the plant species they would otherwise support can't tolerate the lack of sunlight. Open drainage ditches, which are also classed as running water habitats, create damp areas that support various plants. Open water is no longer found in Herm due to the loss of a pond. There is an area of swamp in Herm, however, where freshwater runoff from the land provides sufficient moisture for reeds to persist. Regular monitoring takes place to identify pollutants in our water bodies. However, monitoring of the ecological condition of these habitats is limited. Guernsey Water conducts benthic invertebrate monitoring of 23 streams, providing a long-term assessment of water quality, but there are no consistent long-term surveys of freshwater environmental conditions taking place beyond this. According to the 2018 Habitat Survey of Guernsey, the ecology of our freshwater bodies will depend on the nutrients available. Most are likely to be eutrophic due to high levels of mineral salts in the soil and runoff from fertilizers used on agricultural land. Eutrophication is a term used to describe a process in which nutrients accumulate in a body of water, resulting in increased growth of microorganisms that may then reduce the level of oxygen available in the water. Smaller areas of water will have a very different ecology, as their water levels are more dynamic throughout the year, possibly drying out in the summer months. Before I share a little bit of information about species associated with our freshwater habitats, I'd like to show you some examples of freshwater environments in Guernsey. Perhaps you will recognise them. This is St Saviour's Reservoir. It is a publicly available space with the Millennium Walk going all the way around the reservoir. It is an important area because of the freshwater environment and woodland habitat available, which is good for local wildlife. La Clare Mar. La Clare Mar is a low-lying, brackish wetland on the west coast of Guernsey, located next to the shingle bank at Luray. Salt water is forced into the pond on spring high tides, leading to a brackish environment. This is one of the island's premier reserves for birds, and is comprised of wet grassland, reed beds, and open water. In winter, it regularly supports wildfowl such as teal, widgeon, and shoveler, and a roost of up to 50 little egrets at high tide. During migration periods, a great variety of species have been recorded. To the southeast, viewed from Rue des Mers, is a large area of wet meadows. This has many species of orchid and other wetland plants in May and June and are extremely rich in insects. This is a nature reserve managed by La Société and is publicly accessible. Prés d'Enfer. This small reserve is hidden away on a corner of La Rue de Bourges and is part of the larger Grand Mare area. It was a wet, overgrown meadow which had a large pond dug in it in 1993 to attract wetland birds. This has been very successful, and there are 2 hides on the site, as well as barn owl and kestrel nest boxes, which are regularly used. A smaller, shallow pond has been created with the aim of attracting more dragonflies, as this is probably the best area in the island for these fascinating insects. Along the northern and western sides are areas of reed bed, which are important for several species of birds, such as reed warblers and snipes. Prés d'Enfer is another nature reserve managed by La Société, and as mentioned, it has 2 hides, which can be utilised for those of us who are keen birders. Colin McCarthy Nature Reserve, or Vale Pond. This relatively large reserve consists of a pond and a meadow. Pond is all that remains of the Bray de Vale, channel of water separating the Clos de Vale from the rest of Guernsey until about 200 years ago. It is brackish as seawater enters through the sluice near the road at high tide, at high spring tides. There is a good area of reed bed, and the pond is an important site for birds. It's possible to see a variety of water birds, including snipe, grey heron, and little egrets. Plants around the edge of the pond include sea aster, sea hard grass, and glasswort, which are rare elsewhere in Guernsey. Brackish environments support different invertebrates and plants to totally freshwater environments, and so are areas of conservation value. A hide has been constructed behind the west wall, which can be accessed from the main road, so that you can observe this environment. Visit the La Société website to find out more about this reserve and all of the other amazing reserves that La Société manage and own. It's important to remember that our freshwater environments aren't just those larger bodies of water like Vale Pond and St Saviour's Reservoir. For example, here is a stream that runs down Rue de Moulin-Wet. There are lots of other freshwater environments in Guernsey, those you can access, such as local water lanes with dwits, and those you can't, such as Guernsey Water's water storage locations at Carteret Quarry and Jewess Quarry, as well as private areas. On this map, which is publicly available online, you can see all of the streams, culverts, ditches, ponds, reservoirs, and water-holding quarries. This gives you a flavour of just how much freshwater environment we have in the island. This online mapping resource is a great tool to see what habitats are near you. You can add different environmental layers, including water as shown here, but also the terrestrial habitat categories. So now we know a little bit about our freshwater habitats. Let's have more of a look at some of the native species that are associated with them. Here are a few examples. As well as birds and plants, dragonflies and damselflies are associated with freshwater habitats. They are predatory flying insects referred to collectively as odonata. Key habitats for odonata species include ponds and streams. 15 species of dragonfly and damselfly used to be seen regularly in Guernsey, but more recently this has reduced to around 6 species. Some of these dragonflies and damselflies appear to have become locally extinct, which means that they are no longer present in Guernsey, while some are former breeders that may still be found on island. Dragonflies and damselflies are an important part of the food web, controlling pest species and providing food for birds such as warblers and flycatchers. 5 species of dragonflies and damselflies are no longer present in Guernsey. 2 of those are likely to be vagrants rather than have gone extinct, meaning that they were never really established here. Another 5 species have bred in the past, but may still be seen in Guernsey. The 4-spotted chaser, which was thought to be extinct until records of this species were found at the Guernsey Biological Record Centre. However, there appear to be no recent or reliable records over the last 10 years. An increase in suitable habitat could see some of these odonata species breeding again locally. Included in our State of Nature 2024 talk series is a presentation on insects. So if you'd like to know more about our local insects, please check out that presentation. Let's talk a little bit about freshwater fish and invertebrates. Having a diverse native freshwater community, including benthic, is key to having a healthy freshwater environment. However, very little data on our freshwater species is available. One example is the European eel, which is classed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. It has experienced a 95% population decline in Europe since the 1980s. And while we know that European eel is present in Guernsey, there have not been any formal surveying of them. Another freshwater species, which we know is present in Guernsey streams, is the American signal crayfish. This species is not native and can eat almost anything it finds, including plants, vertebrates, snails, small fish and fish eggs, and can lay up to 250 eggs a year. They can dig long burrows in banks, and this increases the risk of the banks collapsing. We're not sure how this species got into our environment, and we don't really know how many are here. If you catch one, the advice is not to release it again and to get in touch with the States of Guernsey to let them know where it was found. Guernsey Water has conducted benthic surveys on 23 streams across the island using the kick sampling methodology. This technique involves agitating the stones and sediment in a stream and then catching the sample in a hand net further downstream. The abundance and variety of benthic invertebrates is an indicator of water quality, as the majority are unable to tolerate water bodies affected by pollution. Mayflies and caddisflies are intolerant of pollution, so the presence of these species indicates a healthy freshwater ecosystem. The greater the species richness, the better the water quality. Historic data is also available from 2004 and 2005. Benthic surveys were conducted by Guernsey Water on 18 streams, with 108 surveys carried out in total. Stream results ranged from 7 to 50, with higher scores indicating better stream conditions. The average score across the sampled streams was between 25 and 35, which is considered moderate. Streams in the south of the island fared better than those further north. The poorest quality streams were Vale Pond and Bow Valley, both of which have similar muddy stream beds. Streams with less sediment will have increased scores, indicating better stream condition. While knowing what species and habitats are present in Guernsey and Herm is crucial for conservation, it's also important to know the causes and rate of change to the natural environment. We are then able to manage and mitigate the negative impacts. These changes can occur naturally, but are often due to human activities. State of Nature 2024 identifies the primary threats or pressures to our habitats and species, and also notes the cumulative effect or the combined effect of these multiple pressures and the subsequent impact on our natural environment. By increasing our understanding of the pressures facing our natural environment, as well as improving understanding about species and habitats themselves, we can introduce targeted conservation measures to try and address the imbalance brought about by negative human impacts. So let's have a look at some of the pressures being experienced by our freshwater habitats and the associated species. Threats to our freshwater habitats and species include, in no particular order, the introduction and establishment of invasive non-native species. Invasive non-native species, plants or animals which have been introduced to an area by humans, for example, through the global movement of goods and services. They are then able to thrive, often to the detriment of local species, the economy, or public health. Invasives are a considerable threat to biodiversity and can cause major problems on islands. Invasive non-native species may outcompete local species, predate natives, including eggs and young, bring in disease, hybridize with natives, cause habitat alteration and degradation, or negatively alter the balance of ecosystems. Many invasive non-native species can reproduce rapidly and/or are generalists, which is the key to their quick spread and establishment. For example, I talked a little bit earlier about the signal crayfish and the impact that species can have on our freshwater environments. Number 2, habitat loss and degradation. And this can be through activities such as drainage, land clearance, development, and land use change. Number 3, pollution, such as fertilizer and pesticide runoff. Number 4, encroachment of scrub, which is the encroachment of young trees, bushes, and shrubs like hawthorn and gorse, and patches of bramble and nettles, which, if left unmanaged, can dominate to the detriment of the non-woody or herbaceous layer or the freshwater habitat underneath. Number 5, impacts of climate change, such as increased frequency and severity of droughts, which can impact the replenishment of water in freshwater habitats. And number 6, annual DWIT clearance, which can include the removal of sediment from the DWIT and the cutting back of vegetation along the edges. All streams are required by law to be cleared of vegetation and other obstructions twice yearly ahead of parish inspections. The purpose of this is to minimise risk of flooding and to ensure an unrestricted flow of water into the island's water catchment. But, as with the cutting of hedge banks, if this isn't carried out at the right time and in the right way, it can have a detrimental effect on the wildlife these freshwater habitats support. So what can we do to help? We can all play our part, whether it is big or small, in doing our bit to help our local wildlife. Let me share with you some of the actions we can take to reduce our impact on the natural environment and help enhance native biodiversity in Guernsey and Herm. There are many great organisations who are already supporting the natural environment in the work that they do, from biological data collection to invasive species removal, to nature education events, to land management for good biodiversity outcomes. Corporate support is also a valuable way to help these organisations, often volunteer-led, in their work. State of Nature 2024 recognises that we are data poor when it comes to knowing the health of our freshwater habitats and the species they support. This highlights that the collection of useful data is really important. Islanders can contribute to addressing gaps in our knowledge and help to protect our natural environment by recording sightings of local wildlife. Apps such as iRecord or iNaturalist allow you to submit sightings from your phone while you're out and about. These apps link in with the Guernsey Biological Record Centre, allowing all the data to be accessed from one location. Submission of sightings can include native or invasive non-native species and need only include the location, date, and number seen. This is important to help understand abundance and distribution of species across Guernsey and Herm. Attaching photos also allows for the data to be verified by experts. So if you spot something while out and about at any of our freshwater environments, try and snap a quick photo and submit that record. There are several citizen science projects you can get involved with to help monitor our freshwater species and the health of our freshwater habitats. Often, these projects contribute to national schemes, so by collecting data, you'll be helping to build a picture of the British Isles as a whole. One example is the PondNet Spawn Survey run by the Freshwater Habitats Trust in the UK. This project maps the sightings of amphibians to better understand how they use different types of water bodies to breed. The 2025 survey is being launched in December of this year. If you'd like to know more about amphibians in Guernsey and Herm, check out the full State of Nature 2024 report, or watch back the Terrestrial Mammal, Amphibians and Reptiles presentation. Other ways you can help include gardening for nature. For example, consider alternatives to pesticides, such as using organic gardening methods. If you feel that you do have to use pesticides, reduce the frequency of use to reduce the impact on freshwater habitats and insect populations, and follow the appropriate guidelines. You could create wet areas in your gardens, such as ponds or little pools, or you could plant vegetation around the margins and middle of ponds to help help insects during their life cycles. But it is recommended that you understand what you have in your garden before making any changes. Your garden may be perfect for wildlife just as it is. You may have seen that the World Wildlife Fund has recently published the 2024 Living Planet report. This identifies that nature is declining across land, marine, and freshwater, with an 85% decline in the freshwater environment over the 50-year period assessed, reflecting the increasing pressure placed on freshwater habitats and species. The freshwater domain is shown to have suffered the heaviest declines. This is compared to a 69% decline in terrestrial populations and a 56% decline in marine populations. At a local level, this is worrying. As I've spoken about in this presentation, we don't know very much about our freshwater habitats and the associated species. And so the worry is that this global decline is also being represented in Guernsey, but without us knowing enough to be able to implement effective and targeted actions. The Living Planet report notes that average trends in freshwater fish, reptiles, and amphibians are mostly negative, and that these species groups are at greatest risk of extinction in Europe. It also states that food production has resulted in pollution and the conversion of wetlands for agriculture, which globally is driving the loss of freshwater biodiversity. It identifies abstraction of water, which is the taking of water out of a natural source for commercial, industrial, agricultural, or social use, as one of the key pressures on freshwater environments. But thankfully, that is not a pressure that we have to contend with significantly here in Guernsey or Herm. The Living Planet report is a pretty stark read, but very much supports the narrative of State of Nature 2024 for Guernsey and Herm. If you haven't already, it's worth a read. The full State of Nature 2024 report is available on the Nature Commission website or via this QR code. State of Nature 2024 summary report is also available on our website. A big thank you to the current funders of the Nature Commission, States of Guernsey, the Guernsey Community Foundation, and the Social Investment Fund. Thank you very much for listening.